Hey everybody, and welcome to Robin's house. Today I want to talk to you about my cards with Robin. I was using this Spooky Gnomes Stampin' Thin Cuts, and you get these 4 cards for $5 when you purchase this, and I will mail this to you. You can put it together your own self. But one of the cards, this card, uses one of the techniques that I want to talk to you about, and that is basically our white core paper and then what you can do with it. So on this card, I'll bring it up here, you can see that I've sanded the edges lightly of this card, and then I've also inked the edges to add not only a distressed of roughness, but a distressed of aged as well. So I just want to show you a couple of quick techniques about sanding and doing things like that. So you can see on this page that I've sanded the edges, and my favorite way of sanding is to go to the edge of my table, and on my craft table I have a line and then an angle and then off the table. So I find that line, and then my sanding block has a really, really rough edge, and then the rest of the edges are pretty much the same. So you get a different sanding technique depending on which edge of the block you use. So on the black, just because we'll see it better, I'm going to use my rough edge. And then I just take my sanding block and I run it off the edge of my paper. And I press kind of hard, which is another reason why I'm at the edge of my table, so that I'm not actually hurting my table because I'm sanding off of it. And I like to sand both directions so I get that cross hatch. And then I'm going to sand on this paper, and I'm going to do it with one of the other sides, so it'll be a lot lighter of a sand. And then just in case you miss that edge, if you're not careful with where on the edge of your table you go, you're going to sand yourself a line into your paper. So I want to show you the difference. So this was me sanding with the rough sandpaper, and you can see there's quite an edge on it. And then this is me sanding with the lighter edge, and there's not, it's just a little hint. And then what I did for this particular card was I took my almond ink pad and then I ran it over the top of that sanded edge to kind of brown it up and age it a little bit. And you can see I'm just literally putting the edge of the ink pad onto that cardstock. And you can see that if you do it sloppily, then it leaves some lighter spaces and makes some darker spaces, and it looks a little bit more natural. So sanding is one of my favorite techniques. It's a great technique to use on boy cards or old-fashioned cards or things like that. So another way to use that inner white core is with scissor distressing. So we used to have a tool, and you just drag it along the edge of your paper. You can use scissors just as well. And then, so you can do it lightly, just do a light drag, and it'll just lightly curl those edges. Or you can do a heavy drag and like literally go back and forth and tear your edges. And they will each have a very different look. If you see, this one is very rough, and this one is just kind of nicely distressed. So you can do that with scissors, the edge of your scissors, or with a special tool. Another one of my favorite techniques is tearing. And so when you're tearing and you want that white to show, you need to tear up with your right hand, and you can keep it light, or you can tear and make it the white, fatter. And then, but you'll see this other side, if I had torn down, then I would have left my paper with no edge at all, and I didn't want that. But something fun that you can do is if you're creating like an ocean scene, you can put your papers together like this one, and the change in your, you know, going from small to big is a change that you would want when you're doing an ocean. Or you can tear along a ruler and minimize. You can keep your tear much straighter, and you can also keep it more consistent. So tearing is really fun. Tearing and sanding and scissor distressing are really great on boy cards. Another one is dry embossing. So I need to actually show you something cool with dry embossing. I have my Big Shot, and I have my embossing folder, and I have my paper. So when I go in, I put my paper in the embossing folder, put it in my Big Shot sandwich. So everything of this should be fairly normal. And our embossing folders are awesome because you can, as long as your paper is less than 4 1/4 inches wide, you can push that paper all the way through and reline it up on the other side. You can continue running it right through your machine without stopping. So how neat is that? So you can get a strip that's up to 12 inches long. Well, I mean, you can do longer than that if you have longer than that paper, but you can do a much larger paper than the size of that machine or the folder, much larger than the size of the folder. And so most of the time when you are doing dry embossing, you would then sand off lightly some of that design so you can see some of that white showing through. But there's no reason that you can't sand off, you know, turn it over and sand on this side like I did here. You could easily do that here as well. It wouldn't look as good on this exact design, but there's no saying that you can't do it. So some other examples, this is an example of, again, sanding the edge that's raised up. And then this one is also, well, that's also sanding the edge that's raised up. But you can sand almost every bit of it off. You can barely sand it at all. And either way looks different. But a fun technique with those sanding is if you have, for example, a cascading dots, you sand those off and you have snow. Or if you have cascading stars, you now have a nighttime sky. Or you could turn it this way and you have a nighttime sky. Or you can do like I did before and drag some yellow over the top of that nighttime sky, and now you have yellow stars. So that is another fun way to use that embossing and sanding. And then I've got, I love to do this one. So you take your trimmer and your paper, and I'm going to score a line. You know, just for fun, I'll do a line at 1 inch, or I mean at a 1/2 inch, and then at 5/8 of an inch. So I just run my scoring tool through that track. And then once I turn this over, you can see that you can leave it here. You can you see these? I've made 2 train track lines right on my paper. But instead of just leaving them beautiful like that, I'm going to take my sanding block. Now I have a frame. You can keep it light like this. You can keep going until it's perfectly white, whatever technique that you need for what you're doing. And then the last technique that I have is this interesting one. This is another distressing tool. So if you want to, you can wet your paper a little bit. And crinkle it up. And then you open it back up again. And then you can either just leave it like this, or you can take that sander once you're done and you can make it even more. So this is a great way if you need to make like leather on a page layout or something like that, or just an interesting background. So those are my fun ways to use this white core that we have on our paper. I just love it. I hope you found some new techniques that you want to try out. And I hope you get back to crafting. Have a great day. Thanks for coming to Robin's house.